What if someone you called a friend, someone you grew up with, trusted, and supported through life's most difficult changes, turned out to be your killer? This is the story of Nandhini, a 27-year-old software engineer from Chennai. A woman with dreams, ambition, and a kind heart, alive on the eve of her birthday by someone she'd known since childhood. Her killer wasn't a stranger. It wasn't a jealous lover in the conventional sense. It was her former classmate, Vetrimaran, who was once born female, transitioned to male, and believed that love would be enough to make Nandhini his bride. But Nandhini didn't see him that way. She never did. And while she remained polite and compassionate, his obsession quietly grew, until it exploded into something no one could have imagined. On December 23, 2023, what was meant to be a birthday surprise turned into a calculated, horrifying act of violence. What followed was a community in shock, a confession that stunned the nation, and a grieving family left to pick up the pieces. In this documentary, we walk through the lives that led to that fatal night. We trace the warnings missed, the kindness that was exploited, and the justice that followed. This isn't just about a murder. It's about obsession, silence, gender, trust, and the dangerous price of ignoring red flags. If you believe every victim's story matters, take a moment now, hit the like button, subscribe, and turn on notifications. Your support helps us share real stories, spark meaningful conversations, and advocate for the change we need. Let us know where you're watching from and what time it is in your location. In the southern Indian city of Madurai, life moved at its own unhurried pace. It was here, in the narrow lanes lined with jasmine cellars and temple bells ringing in the distance, that two young children first crossed paths, Nandhini and Pandi Maheswari. Their story began in a modest all-girls school, where both were enrolled in the same class. From the start, they were drawn to each other. Nandhini, known for her calm nature and helpfulness, and Pandi, often quiet but eager to be seen and understood. The school environment was strict but nurturing, a place where uniforms were neatly pressed and friendships were deeply valued. Nandhini excelled in academics, particularly in subjects like science and English. She was known for being disciplined, polite, and focused on her studies. Pandi Maheswari, on the other hand, was more reserved and introspective. While not at the top of the class, Pandi made up for it with creativity and a strong sense of loyalty to those she trusted. Their bond grew stronger with each passing year. They sat next to each other in class, exchanged notes, and often teamed up for school projects. Nandhini was a source of steady encouragement for Pandi, and people noted how they complemented each other. Outside the classroom, they visited each other's homes, celebrated birthdays together, and were almost always seen as a pair. Their classmates sometimes teased them for being inseparable, but neither seemed to mind. As they entered adolescence, Pandi began experiencing deeper questions about identity. Born biologically female, Pandi started to feel a disconnect between how others saw her and how she felt inside. These were complex emotions, especially in a conservative setting, and while Pandi didn't have the language to articulate these feelings then, the discomfort was real. Still, Nandhini stood by her friend. She may not have fully understood the struggle, but her friendship never wavered. As Nandhini stepped into adulthood, her focus remained firmly on her education and building a stable career. Known for her quiet determination and academic consistency, she completed her undergraduate studies in Madurai with good grades. Her aptitude in computer science and problem-solving drew her toward the IT sector, a field that promised growth and independence. When she secured a job at a reputed tech company in Nandambakam, Chennai, it was a milestone not just for her, but for her entire family. With dreams of professional success, she relocated to the city, moving in with her paternal uncle in Kanadi Nagar for support and safety. Nandhini adjusted quickly to life in Chennai. Her days became a blur of deadlines, meetings, and late-night calls. She was regarded by her colleagues as responsible, diligent, and soft-spoken. The shift from a small-town environment to a buzzing metro came with challenges, but she adapted with quiet strength. She rarely took leave, often skipped personal outings, and spent most of her time improving her technical skills. Her goal was clear: financial independence, stability, and perhaps one day helping her parents retire early. Despite her heavy workload, she remained in touch with a few old friends, including Maheswari, now known as Vetrimaran. Meanwhile, Maheswari was walking a vastly different road. Assigned female at birth, Maheswari began to experience deep discomfort with her gender identity during adolescence. The dissonance grew stronger over the years, and by the time her peers were focused on college admissions and career goals, Maheswari was quietly grappling with a much deeper question. Who am I really? By her early 20s, she had reached a life-altering realization, one that would define her identity, shape her future, and eventually influence her relationships in deeply complex ways. After much thought, research, and quiet conversations with others who had walked a similar path, she made a firm decision. She identified as male and wanted to live her life in alignment with that truth. Choosing the name Vetrimaran, she began taking the first steps toward gender transition. This was not a decision made lightly. It required courage, resilience, and a willingness to face social stigma, especially in a conservative environment where discussions around gender identity were still taboo. Vetrimaran's transition began with hormone replacement therapy. Under medical supervision, he started testosterone injections, which gradually deepened his voice, changed his facial structure, and encouraged the growth of facial and body hair. Over time, these visible changes began aligning his outward appearance with the gender he had always identified with internally. But the process wasn't just physical. Emotionally and socially, it was a journey of navigating new dynamics. Eventually, Vetrimaran made the decision to undergo gender affirmation surgery. This step was crucial for him, not just in solidifying his physical transformation, but in gaining a sense of personal closure. He wanted to be fully recognized and accepted in his true gender. After the surgery, he updated his legal documents to reflect his new name and identity. To the world, he was now Vetrimaran, a man both in name and presentation. But while he embraced this new life with confidence, it also changed the nature of his relationship with people from his past. The transition was layered with hardship. Apart from the physical toll, Vetrimaran faced social alienation. Some family members refused to accept his new identity. Old classmates blocked his number. Neighborhood whispers turned into open scorn. He withdrew into himself. Through all this, Nandhini's continued communication was a lifeline. She didn't judge. She didn't ask invasive questions. She listened. She cared. While her support was rooted in empathy, Vetrimaran began to interpret it differently. Over time, admiration turned into longing, and longing grew into obsession. For Nandhini, however, the relationship had always been one of companionship, shaped by shared childhood memories. She was focused on her job, her independence, and adjusting to life in Chennai. Their interactions became less frequent, partly due to her growing responsibilities at work. When she did respond, it was out of politeness, not passion. Unaware of the depth of Vetrimaran's emotional investment, she did not recognize how her distance was perceived. For Vetrimaran, every delayed response felt like a slight, every cancelled plan a betrayal. At Nandhini IT firm in Nungambakkam, Chennai, she began making new friends and adapting to her professional life. Despite the fast pace of work, she stayed in touch with Vetrimaran, who was still emotionally invested in their friendship. While Nandhini viewed him as a childhood companion deserving of kindness and support, especially after his gender transition, Vetrimaran interpreted her gestures as deeper emotional commitment. Over time, his behavior shifted. Vetrimaran would frequently call and message Nandhini, even during her office hours. If she didn't respond immediately, he would question her absence or accuse her of ignoring him. Friends noticed how Nandhini's phone often lit up with repeated calls from him, even during meetings or social outings. He began monitoring her social media activity, asking why she was spending time with certain colleagues, especially male ones. Nandhini, by nature polite and empathetic, tried to explain that she was simply being friendly and professional. But Vetrimaran's insecurity grew. He once confronted her after she posted a photo from a team lunch, accusing her of lying about her whereabouts. On another occasion, he became visibly upset when she attended a friend's birthday party and didn't inform him in advance. These interactions started to feel less like concern and more like control. These incidents became frequent. According to people close to Nandhini, she sometimes felt emotionally drained, but didn't want to cut ties abruptly out of fear of hurting him. She knew he had lost many friends after transitioning and didn't want to be one more person to walk away. But as time went on, it was evident that Vetrimaran wasn't just being emotionally dependent, he was becoming obsessive. He started showing up at her apartment without informing her. The possessiveness intensified further. He started waiting outside her office, unannounced. Once, when she was walking with a male colleague, he followed them for several blocks. She tried to downplay the encounters to her family, but close friends say she had begun to feel uncomfortable. She even considered changing her commute route just to avoid him, a clear sign that his presence was affecting her routine and peace of mind. The tension escalated further when Vetrimaran expressed a desire to marry her. Nandhini declined. She emphasized that she had always seen him as a friend and nothing more. This rejection, while calm and clear, didn't sit well with him. He started withdrawing at first, then would suddenly reappear, apologizing and asking for another chance. He brought gifts, sent emotional texts, and tried to guilt her into reconsidering. Behind this cycle of pursuit and rejection, Nandhini's daily life became strained. She couldn't focus completely on work, and even her family noticed her growing stress. She had always been a cheerful and focused person, but now she seemed distracted, often checking over her shoulder. What began as a long-standing friendship was now slowly turning into a troubling pattern of control, confusion, and emotional pressure, signs she didn't know would one day lead to tragedy. As Nandhini's 27th birthday approached, she was in good spirits. Despite her demanding schedule as a software engineer in Chennai, she remained grounded and warm-hearted. In the days leading up to her birthday, Vetrimaran reached out to her with an invitation. He said he had planned a quiet celebration. Just the two of them. It would be a meaningful day, he claimed, and he had arranged for them to do some good deeds together. Nandhini, cautious yet not wanting to offend him, agreed. On the morning of December 23, 2023, the eve of her birthday, they visited a local temple. Vetrimaran insisted on offering prayers for her well-being. He then took her to an orphanage, where they made a donation in her name. Nandhini, touched by the gesture, was unaware that these activities were not spontaneous. They were part of a meticulously constructed facade designed to disarm her. Throughout the day, Vetrimaran behaved calmly, even warmly. He complimented her, took pictures, and expressed how special she was to him. Nandhini maintained her friendly tone but kept emotional distance, unaware of the internal conflict simmering beneath his composed surface. Behind the scenes, he had been making detailed preparations, even purchasing chains and petrol in advance. He had also deleted messages and call logs to avoid suspicion. If you've made it this far, take a moment to support our work. Hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications. Your engagement helps us keep telling stories like Nandhini's, real, raw, and necessary. It only takes a second, but it makes a big difference. Let's keep these conversations going. Later that evening, after a day of visiting temples and orphanages under the pretense of a heartfelt birthday surprise, Vetrimaran made one final suggestion. He told Nandhini he had saved the most special gift for last. His voice was calm, almost affectionate. He said it was something meaningful, something he had planned for a long time, but he needed privacy to give it to her. Nandhini appeared hesitant. It was late. She had spent most of the day with him and was likely growing tired. But trusting him, as she always had, she agreed. She had known him since childhood, after all. They went toward the outskirts of Chennai. Their destination, Kolattur. It was a sparsely populated area with open land, abandoned plots, and very little foot traffic. On the surface, it may have seemed like a quiet place for reflection or conversation, but in reality, it had been chosen with cold calculation. There were no CCTV cameras, no shops, no movement, just open space and shadows, perfect for what he had planned. When they arrived, he asked her to close her eyes for the surprise. She obliged. He then gently blindfolded her. As she stood there, unaware, he took out the chains he had hidden earlier. What followed next would forever haunt those who later pieced together the events. Without warning, he fastened the first chain around her wrists. She was startled. At first, she may have thought it was a prank, but as the second and third chains tightened around her arms and legs, panic set in. She began to protest, but he didn't stop. Her voice rose in confusion, then fear. Then the violence escalated. Vetrimaran pulled out a sharp object, believed to be a blade, and slashed her wrists and ankles. Not to kill her immediately, but to immobilize her. The cuts were deep enough to cause pain, bleeding, and shock, but not to end her life quickly. Nandhini screamed, loud, piercing cries that echoed across the open land. But the most horrifying part had yet to come. With her bound, injured, and unable to escape, he retrieved a plastic bottle. It was filled with petrol. He didn't say a word. No warning, no explanation. He poured the contents over her body. The fumes filled the air. For a moment he paused, perhaps battling with a final sense of doubt or staring at the woman he claimed to care for. But whatever humanity remained vanished in the next instant. He struck a match. The fire caught instantly. Nandhini was engulfed. Her cries turned into agonizing shrieks carried by the night air. The smell of burning fuel and fabric filled the area. Residents living nearby heard the sounds and rushed toward the source. But by the time they arrived, the damage had been done. Vetrimaran had already fled, disappearing into the darkness, leaving behind a horror no one would forget. Nandhini, still conscious, was able to give rescuers a name and phone number, information that would later become critical to identifying her attacker. But her body had suffered unimaginable trauma. That night, what should have been a quiet celebration turned into a crime that would shake an entire city. But here is the shocking twist. The police, acting on the number she gave, immediately dialed it. The call connected to Vetrimaran. When questioned over the phone, he feigned shock and concern, claiming he had no idea what had happened. He quickly arrived at the scene, blending in with the worried crowd and even helping to carry Nandhini into the ambulance. His calm demeanor raised no immediate suspicions. He told officers he had been looking for Nandhini and had come when he heard about the commotion. To many, he seemed like a concerned friend. At the hospital, doctors fought to stabilize Nandhini. She had suffered deep burns on over 60% of her body. Despite their efforts, her condition deteriorated rapidly. Before she slipped into unconsciousness, she once again mentioned Vetrimaran's name, reinforcing her earlier statement. Doctors noted that she had been conscious during the ambulance ride and expressed fear for her life. She asked if her family had been informed. Meanwhile, investigators started piecing together the crime. Vetrimaran's presence at the scene and his connection to Nandhini drew attention. His version of events didn't align with the early testimonies from Nandhini and the passers-by. Officers began questioning him more carefully. His behavior became more guarded. Then, without warning, he vanished. By the time police traced his address, he had already gone into hiding. His disappearance only deepened their suspicion. But with Nandhini's dying words, phone call records, and eyewitness accounts, the net was beginning to close around him. The search turned into a full-scale manhunt. However, it didn't take long for him to be arrested. When investigators brought Vetrimaran in for questioning, he initially denied any involvement. He maintained a calm exterior, even expressing concern for Nandhini's condition. He claimed he had been contacted by someone about her injury and had rushed to the scene in shock. But the evidence was already pointing in his direction. The phone number Nandhini whispered to a bystander before losing consciousness matched his. He was the last person seen with her, and CCTV footage placed him in the vicinity. With mounting pressure and evidence closing in, Vetrimaran eventually broke down. In his confession, Vetrimaran detailed every step. He had planned the encounter under the guise of a birthday celebration. He blindfolded her, claiming he had a surprise gift, but instead, he slashed her wrists, ankles, and neck with a blade he brought with him. Then he poured petrol over her body and as horrifying as it was, the confession exposed not just what he did, but why. Vetrimaran admitted that he had loved Nandhini for years. He had undergone gender-affirming surgery not only to align with his identity, but also because he hoped she would eventually accept him as a partner. He described feeling isolated, rejected by friends and society. Nandhini was one of the few who remained in contact with him. But even that friendship, he said, started to feel like pity. He struggled with the feeling that she was merely being kind out of obligation, not genuine affection. He confessed that he became possessive. When he saw her talking to other men, especially male coworkers, he felt threatened. He began to believe she was deliberately avoiding him and that she might soon leave his life entirely. The idea of losing her, after sacrificing so much, overwhelmed him. In his words, "If she wasn't going to be with me, I didn't want her to be with anyone else." Following the confession, investigators requested a psychological evaluation of Vetrimaran. They wanted to understand whether he was fully aware of his actions and their consequences. The assessment confirmed he was mentally fit to stand trial. Vetrimaran was formally charged with multiple offenses under Indian Penal Code, including Section 02 for murder, Section 307 for attempt to murder, due to the initial slashing of Nandhini's wrists and throat, Section 364 for kidnapping, luring under false pretenses, and Section 201 for destruction of evidence. The police also added sections under the Tamil Nadu Prohibition of Harassment of Women Act, due to the disturbing nature of his acts and past behavior leading up to the crime. As the case moved to court, the Chennai public prosecutor presented a compelling case, focusing on motive, premeditation, and the brutality of the act. Evidence included eyewitness testimonies, forensic reports linking Vetrimaran to the weapon the attack, and most critically, Nandhini's own dying declaration to police officials. Phone records clearly placed Vetrimaran at the scene, and medical reports confirmed that the injuries were not self-inflicted. The defense team initially attempted to argue that Vetrimaran acted under emotional distress, citing his struggles with acceptance after transitioning. They also tried to claim that the attack was not pre-planned but a crime of passion, triggered by perceived betrayal. The hearings drew significant media attention, with courtrooms filled with journalists, activists, and members of the public. The case sparked outrage across Tamil Nadu and beyond, with demands for maximum punishment. Women's rights groups and LGBTQ+ advocates debated the narrative carefully, condemning the crime while emphasizing that Vetrimaran's actions should not be used to stigmatize the trans community at large. Public petitions demanding fast-tracking of the trial and swift justice were circulated online. Protesters staged candlelight vigils outside the courthouse, holding placards with messages like "Justice for Nandhini" and "End gender-based violence." The judge, acknowledging the public interest and weight of the evidence, denied bail and ordered judicial custody for Vetrimaran. The trial was slated to move forward on a fast-track court schedule, with priority handling due to the brutal nature of the case and the overwhelming outcry for justice. As of now, following his arrest in December 2023, he is remanded to judicial custody. No official reports indicate that a trial has concluded or that a verdict has been delivered. When news of Nandhini's death reached her family, the shock was paralyzing. Her parents, who had always seen her as a determined and caring daughter, were devastated. She had left Madurai with dreams of building a better future, and her work in the IT sector had been a source of pride for the entire family. Her sudden and violent death shattered that pride into unbearable sorrow. Nandhini's father, speaking to the media outside the hospital, could barely hold back tears. He described his daughter as someone who never hesitated to help others. She was kind to everyone. She respected people, regardless of who they were, he said. He also mentioned how she had supported Vetrimaran when others had distanced themselves. Even when others cut ties with him, she stood by him as a friend. That's the kind of person she was. Her mother, too distraught to speak in public, expressed her pain through relatives. They shared how Nandhini often spoke about wanting to take care of her parents and build a home for them in Chennai. Her life had been full of hope and quiet plans. None of them had imagined it would end in such horror. The family struggled to make sense of why someone so close to her could betray her trust in such a brutal way. They admitted that Nandhini had never voiced any serious concerns about Vetrimaran, likely because she did not want to burden them. In hindsight, they believed her empathy may have blinded her to the risks. In their public statements, the family did not just grieve. They called for action. They urged authorities to ensure justice was swift and visible. They also asked that workplaces and educational institutions implement systems to help individuals recognize and report signs of obsessive or possessive behavior. They called on society to talk more openly about gender identity, relationships, and emotional boundaries, not to stigmatize anyone, but to ensure safety for all. "We are not blaming identity," one relative clarified. "We are blaming the violence. No one deserves this, no matter who they are." What can we learn from the murder of Nandhini? For me, the murder of Nandhini is not just a case file. It is a powerful reminder of the importance of understanding emotional boundaries in relationships. Nandhini extended kindness and empathy toward a childhood friend during his personal transformation. But those actions were tragically misinterpreted. Her story shows us how dangerous it can be when emotional dependence is mistaken for love, and when one person's affection turns into possessiveness. It teaches us that even long-standing friendships require clear boundaries, especially when feelings become one-sided. It also highlights the urgent need for mental health awareness. Vetrimaran's internal struggles, jealousy, and emotional instability were left unaddressed. With the right support, counseling, or early intervention, this tragedy might have been prevented. Most of all, Nandhini's death forces us to confront how unchecked obsession, lack of communication, and societal silence around emotional distress can create the perfect storm for violence. Her memory now stands as a call to action, to listen, to speak up, to take signs of emotional manipulation seriously, and to ensure that kindness is never exploited. If this story moved you, don't let it end here. Speak up when you see warning signs, set boundaries, and most importantly, listen when someone says they feel unsafe. If you believe in justice, in empathy, and in building safer relationships, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications. Your support helps us tell stories that matter, amplify voices that are often unheard, and push for the change that's long overdue.